This is Grafted Together with ACSI Chief Ministry Officer Jerry Nelson.
This podcast is dedicated to equipping leaders with the knowledge and skills needed for spiritual formation and biblical worldview development. I firmly believe that the most valuable resource in our collective efforts is to see all of our constituents in all of our schools embody Jesus Christ. I know we're all working hard towards that and to support one another. Recently, I heard a leader express he believes his responsibility is to set the table and facilitate conversations amongst people. Our podcast is focused on just that. We want to connect you with thinkers, leaders, and individuals who are actively practicing what they preach in their respective fields. We provide them with a platform to share their experiences and offer you guidance on basically who to reach out if you have a specific need. We believe in the power of people coming together through a strong network of individuals with shared interests. Therefore, we aim to expand our spiritual formation ambassador network. Currently, we have identified approximately 300 spiritual formation ambassadors from around the world. Our goal is to reach 1,000 ambassadors by the end of the 2027 school year. So if you're an avid listener to this podcast and know someone who is a spiritual formation ambassador, these are individuals who hold the responsibility of leading discipleship efforts in their school. So this can be a head of school, a director of discipleship, a campus pastor, a lower elementary school teacher whose responsibility is chapel. It could be a volunteer parent who's responsible for overseeing a parent ministry. It could be a diversity director, a biblical unity director, anyone who is involved in this all-important role of discipleship and spiritual formation. Frankly, the title doesn't necessarily matter, but the role and the function that you hold within your institution, and most importantly, your passion for seeing students, parents, teachers, all become disciples of Christ. That makes you a spiritual formation ambassador. So if that's you, we encourage you to join the network. And if you know someone else who is a spiritual formation ambassador, encourage them to join as well. So how can you do that? Go to acsi.org/spiritual formation, scroll down and look for the box that says join the network. Again, acsi.org/spiritual formation and click on the join the network button. Go ahead, sign up and share the link with those in your school, as well as those in your respective states, regions, and country. And please feel free to share this information very widely. Again, our goal, 1,000 spiritual formation ambassadors identified by the end of the 26-27 school year. Imagine the depth of resources and expertise that will be available by adding 700 more voices to our network. Remember, spiritual formation is what distinguishes Christian education from all other forms of Christian education. And remember, we are always stronger together. All right, so joining me to talk about and really get an update. I told Tia, at the beginning, I was like, man, we haven't talked in a while. I need an update on what's going on. And that's Tia Gaines, who is the Executive Director of Unify Ed, a Center for Hope and Unity. And she also serves as Associate Director in the Office of Social Equity and Community and part of the President's Center at the University of Pennsylvania. A seasoned consultant, writer, and conference speaker, Tia is passionate about advancing kingdom diversity, unity, and belonging within Christian education. With over 20 years of experience in education, spanning international, suburban, and urban settings, she brings a rich and varied perspective to her work. Tia has developed curriculum and resources focused on cultural humility, intercultural competency, dialogue, and reflection with a particular passion for urban education, community engagement, and school partnership. Tia sits on the Board of Trustees for the ACSI, Association of School Christian International. I think I got that right. And the board, it's kind of a shame that I didn't get the organization that I work for, their name right? Anyways, Tia sits on the board of Be to the World, a nonprofit organization that establishes schools in war-torn countries. She is also a senior fellow at the Center for the Advancement of Christian Education, also known as CASE. And she and her husband, Joel, live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Woo woo.
Go Eagles!
Woo! Go Eagles. Go Birds.
Yeah. Tia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly no stranger to ACSI, but as you know, Christian education is just continuing to expand. Many people are starting schools. I mean, man, what an amazing time to be in Christian education. So, as I said, I don't want to assume that everybody knows you. So, I'd love for you just to, as briefly as you can, man, tell us a little bit about your Christian school journey. What got you into this particular type of work?
Hmm. Um, yeah, well, my Christian school journey is I am a product of Christian education, K through 12. So, I grew up in a very small town in New Jersey and went to a very small Christian school. And it's interesting, when I reflect on kind of like what got me into this work.
Mhm.
There's so many, kind of buzzwords that we use, and I feel like belonging is a new word, like
Mhm.
flourishing. Everybody's talking about like flourishing in Christian education, and that's become a big buzzword. It's an important word, but it's become
Mhm.
like a very popular word. And I feel like belonging is one of those words too. But belonging has always been something
Mhm.
really, really important to me. And I don't know, that's really something that God has like placed in my heart. I was always, maybe it's like an empath in me, but I was always the kid who noticed who was left out,
Yeah.
who was on the margins, who was like sitting and not being included. Even as a child, I just had a deep sensitivity to kids who were being left out.
Mhm.
If there was a group of kids that was playing and there was just one kid who was sitting on the sidelines, sitting and eating lunch by themselves, just being excluded. And it had nothing to do with race or ethnicity. I just was always hyper aware of who was
Mhm.
not included. And so belonging has always been something that what and I didn't always have the language for it, but it
Mhm.
was always something that God has really like had in my heart, and also justice. I've
Yeah.
always had this strong like justice bend. And even as a kid, I'd just be like, that's not right. That's not fair. And I just would
Mhm.
want to like advocate for people. And so those are things that, you can't always kind of pinpoint where that started, or, where you might have like learned that, except to say that that is something that God has nurtured in my heart
Yeah.
over the years. And so now it's kind of flourished into, words like biblical unity, or
Mhm.
like, racial reconciliation
Mhm.
maybe. And now I can articulate better, this is a gospel issue. Like when we
Mhm.
think about Ephesians 2:14, that's the gospel. Jesus broke down the wall of hostility
Yeah.
between God and man, but also between one another, right? And
Yeah.
that's the gospel. And so when we talk about these things, I had a friend say, so do you do racial reconciliation work or do you do like gospel work? And I'm like, it's not an or. It's they are the racial reconciliation work is gospel
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And so I have more of the language as an adult to kind of talk about this, but even as a child, I knew what it felt like to not belong. I always cared deeply about other people belonging. And I always had a really strong justice bone where I really wanted to advocate for anyone who I felt like was experiencing some sort of injustice. And that's
Mhm.
just something that the Lord has placed in my heart. Yeah.
I was just with a leader who does this type of work as well this earlier this week, and he was asking me about the work that I do at ACSI, and he started sharing some of his life experiences and some of the challenges that he's had, but it turned into a conversation about our spirituality and how the Lord has uniquely crafted us, both the desires in our heart, but also experientially,
Hmm.
and the conclusion that we both came to is that, man, God has just been shaping us over the years. So I'm curious, God placed this desire in your heart, and you just mentioned that, God gave you the language to be able to articulate what was in your heart, that passion, that desire.
Mhm.
How have you been shaped spiritually in other ways doing this work?
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. So I said, kindergarten through 12th grade, I went to a Christian school. But then also I went to a Bible college.
Mm,
And so in Bible college, I majored in secondary education, but I also majored in biblical studies.
mm.
And that's where I met my husband, Joel Gaines. Woot
Mhm.
woot, shout out Joel. Um, and
The inseparable. You guys are so inseparable, boy.
Yes, that's my partner, my partner in crime, my partner
Mm,
in education, my partner in everything.
mm,
But yes, so I met Joel in Bible college, and then right after college, I went on a short term. It's not. I shouldn't actually describe it as like a missions trip, but I taught overseas in
mm,
Honduras, and I taught at a Christian school, and it was my first time, working outside of the country. And
mm,
again, the experience was life changing, but also deeply spiritual because I'm,
mm,
really having to rely on God. I'm away from my family. It's a culture and a language that is completely new to me. I thought I knew Spanish because I studied it like in high school and a little bit in college, but then I'm immersed in it and I'm like, whoa, do I not really know this language,
mm,
because it's just you're completely I'm supposed to be doing parent teacher conferences in Spanish. Like what, like I'm, everything. And it was just so overwhelming and just the ways that I had to rely on the Lord in that way. And for everything, I thought it would be this amazing adventure, but there were so many things about it that were so disorienting. And I felt so lonely and it was really challenging. It ended up being the most beautiful experience of my life,
mm,
but it really grounded me in my faith during that time. And it also helped me so much in the work that I'm doing because, it's interesting, like it gave me so much empathy and compassion
mm.
for people who are really experiencing what it means to be in a different culture with a different language and
Interesting.
how hard that is. And I was the one who was in a different country with a native language, and people were saying to me, why don't you know this language? Like,
Mm,
speak Spanish or go back to your country. That's what they were
mm,
saying to me.
mm.
And,
Wow.
and so I have so much compassion for how hard it is to be an adult and learn a language. And I'm sloppily trying to like get through my Spanish, but did not know it well enough. And I thought that I knew it well. And also, I was a college educated, very smart individual, but how people associate your lack of a second language with a lack of intelligence. So
Wow.
because my language was so poor, there's this sense of which, people kind of speak to you as though you're actually not intelligent. But I was an educator, I was a teacher,
Yeah.
and so now on this side of it here in the States, dealing with people who are in America as second language speakers, I have such compassion and so much empathy. And so I see how God has like used my experiences for the work that I do in belonging because there's so many different reasons why people feel struggle to feel a sense of belonging. And the Lord has used so many of my life experiences to really help orient my heart towards empathy. And
Mm,
for that, I'm really grateful. But a lot of it is like the lived experiences of living in an urban context. Joel and I planted a church in North Philly, and
mm.
part of it was we don't want to just drive into the city to minister to the people there. We
Yeah.
want to be indigenous to
Mhm.
the community where we're doing ministry. So
Yeah.
we bought our first house in North Philly so that the neighborhood store where everyone was going to was our neighborhood store, and the neighborhood schools was our schools. And we were rubbing shoulders with the people that we were doing ministry with, and their burdens were our burdens.
Yeah.
And I know that you've heard kind of that language through spreading hope, and
Mhm.
that was our story too. And we lived there for 10 years, and we raised our Josiah and Hosanna in North Philly.
Mhm.
And that kind of mindset really shapes the way that you do ministry, and shapes the way that you think about the context that you're in. And so when I say that I have a heart for urban education, it's because we lived there, and
Yeah.
we raised our family there, and that was our community. We didn't just kind of like drive in there to do ministry.
Yeah.
And the same thing with when I was in Honduras. I lived there. That I lived there for a year and taught there. And I think it just makes a difference about your mindset. And I'm grateful for those experiences and how the Lord has used them to help me think well about the work that I do.
You know, and several verses in scripture come to mind just as you were talking. One of them is from Hebrews, where it says, we have a high priest who is able to sympathize with us. And why is that? Because he incarnated himself. He came to dwell with us, right? Call him Emmanuel. And so all of the things that we experienced, all of the things that we feel or we will feel or people have felt, for ages, he knows. He felt it all, right? Desertion. He
Yeah,
felt hunger. He felt thirst. He was homeless.
yeah,
The Son of
yeah,
Man. Birds have birds have necks, foxes have holes, but the Son of Man doesn't have a place to lay his head. And I think you just really hit on something that's really, really important. Just even with your story, your origin story, we would call that Tia's origin
uh-huh,
story, right?
yeah,
Give
uh-huh,
context. Is that it's not that it's impossible, but it's very, very hard and challenging to truly empathize with someone when you don't get involved, like when you don't get in the middle of their mess. Think of Mother Teresa. What made
mhm,
Mother Teresa such a powerful, figure? She was in the middle of the mess in Calcutta. She was
yeah,
there. She labored, with the people. And
yeah,
and I imagine that what doing that was not easy. There were challenges. What were some of the challenges that you endured? And because you did all of this intentional, just like Jesus intentionally came to earth to die for our sins. You and Joel intentionally planted that church in North Philly. You intentionally wanted to rub shoulders, to go to the neighborhood store, but there's challenges that come along with that. What were those challenges and how did you guys overcome those challenges?
yeah. I mean, some of the challenges, the external challenges are people misunderstanding you, so being misunderstood.
Mm,
I think both of our families, my family, Joel's family, really did not understand the choice that we were making, and grieved it, you know. And
mm,
so we both have obviously loving parents that want what's best for you. And so they're kind of like, we worked really hard so that you could have a better future. And so they don't understand the decision to like move to a lesser thing, if that makes sense.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think that there was a lot of grief in that, and lack of understanding, and that was hard to feel like you're letting someone down and disappointing someone. Um, and then there were all of the practical challenges of what it means to live and raise your family in that environment. Our car was broken into constantly, a lack of just, normal kind of levels of safety that you would have in a more suburban environment,
Yeah.
hyper vigilant, things of that nature. And so, um, but that's part of what it means to enter into that space, you know, and
Yeah.
there's so many beautiful things about living in an urban environment that we enjoyed, but some of the challenges are you take on those challenges and you're willing to step into that. But I think a big part of it was just really feeling very misunderstood
Mm.
by a lot of other people who are kind of looking on and saying like, what are you doing and why are you doing that? And that
Mhm.
feels really extreme and that's not necessary.
Yeah.
And oh, do you think you're better because you're doing that? And kind of a
Mm.
lot of judgment. And so those are hard things to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, again, just listening to your story, it's like it's I can't help but feel like that's exactly what Christ really calls us all to do, right? That it is it, it's to man, how many passages in scripture? I mean, I'm reading through Proverbs with my son, so my oldest son. So we're reading through Proverbs. So my commitment to him this year is like, doesn't matter where I am. I said, don't matter what the time zone. We're gonna get up 5:30, Eastern time. We're gonna read that proverb together. You'll tell me your takeaways and your verses. I'll share with you. You'll tell me what you want me to pray for you about. Bam, 20 minutes and we're done. So it's been great because he texted me this morning. He's like, Daddy, I want to start a little bit earlier because I'm taking grandma to the train station. And I was like, okay, no problem. It worked out because I was getting on a plane at that time. But
Uh,
one thing that you can't deny is scripture's pretty clear about how folks treat the poor
hmm.
and treat the poor and the need. And it just cuts through like really, really, really clearly. It even talks about how people in positions of authority, how kings treat the poor. Like that's actually a mark of a righteous, ruler in a sense. Like
Yeah,
how do you treat the least of these?
yeah,
And I can definitely see how folks can or misunderstand you, especially in this day and age. And I know that can be emotionally taxing, but I know this also, what keeps you going in that work is the joy that you experience
yeah.
when you see lives transform. Do you have, is there a story or is there a situation that just really kind of pops out to you that says, man, this is just so worth all the criticisms that I may experience or all the challenges and the hypervigilance? I definitely know that I got my stories like that as well. What
Oh
stories stick out
yeah.
to you?
Oh yeah. There's so many stories, and they often revolve around students that Joel and I have been involved with. But yes, one of my favorite stories, and I'll leave the names out, but we have I had a student who I met her. She was in middle school, and I was her teacher. And she was just kind of really acting out and just having a hard time in school. And she had a soft pretzel and she threw it at her teacher's head, and her teacher called me in and was like, "Can you help me? She won't listen to me." And so I came and had some stern words with her, but she liked me, so she was listening to me. And I just took a courageous step of inviting her to church, which
Mm,
I did not work at a Christian school, so this was like a very bold thing to do.
mhm, mhm,
But because she lived in North Philly, and my church was in North Philly, and so she met me at church, and she started coming to church with us, and then I eventually like met the rest of her family, and her twin sister got pregnant at
mm,
14, and she was planning to have an abortion. And
Oh,
she said, like, I know that this is not good, but my family's really, my grandmom, they lived with, is really pressuring her to do this. And so, will you talk to my grandmom? And I was like, oh, this is like a really sticky
wow.
situation. And so I went to the house and I was like, this is no judgment, but I just want you to know however I can help and support and come around, you as a family. And grandma was really angry, like, stay out of this and da 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 da. But I was just trying to minister to her and love her, and and the next day, the twin sister said she just had all of these dreams, these terrible dreams about, what it would be like to abort her baby, and she
Mm.
decided not to do it. And
Wow.
she said, if I keep the baby, will you help me? And Joel and I said, yes, we will. And so we stayed in their lives. The twins are now 27 years old. They're still in our lives. They're like part of the family. They've gone on
Wow.
vacations with us. They've celebrated holidays with us. We helped the twin with her son, buying him clothes, watching him over the summer, so that the twin could finish school and go to
Yeah.
community college. But really taking him in, so that she had to finish school,
Yeah.
but it wasn't just like, don't do this thing. It's, here's
Hmm.
how we'll step in and help you. I brought her
Yeah.
to her doctor's appointments. I was there when
Wow.
she had the baby. And so really just being a part of their lives from 14 to now they're 27. And yeah, I mean, my kids grew up with them, and it's just been amazing to celebrate all of the wins with them, from graduating to graduating college. And again, like I said, they've gone on family vacations with us because of some mental health issues. One of the twins has lived with our family off and on over the
Mhm.
years. But they've really been integrated into our family in a really special way. And that
Yeah.
just could not have happened had not we been a part of the community in the way that
Mhm.
we were, because they would not have trusted us if we
Right.
were some family out in the burbs. Now we're in the
Mhm.
burbs, but at the time, we
Yeah.
were not in the burbs. At the time, we were a part of their community.
Yeah.
And that's why I could go to grandmom and sit in her living room and have a really hard conversation with her, because we lived where she lived and we were able to build that trust and that foundation with her.
Yeah, I often quote, and the book that's just really been influential on to me is Ray Backey's Urban Christian, and one of the principles that he talks about, um, and like if you're going to, urban centers are hard places to minister. They're not easy. They're not for the faint of heart. But one of his principles, there's two of them that always sticks out to me. He says you got to earn the right to witness. And the other one, he says, take your family with you.
Hmm.
And it's like those two things. Cause
I write that down. Yes.
yeah, yeah. There's nine of them there. But those two have resonated with me because, I know, when I talk to other people about what urban ministry is like, especially, me being in Miami, I was born and raised here. The principles still apply.
Yeah.
You can't, it may seem like, well, since we live in America, you can go and, take your family Bible and thump people over the head, and it just doesn't, it won't stick. I mean, maybe they have a lump
Right.
on their head, that's about it, but
Right.
it's not going to penetrate their heart. And that particular principle is proven true. It's when you are faithfully present, right? You are trying to do the right thing, trying to exhibit those fruits of the spirit, that people say, "Oh, there's something about you. I feel like I can trust you," just as you said. And then they say, "Hey, can you speak into my life?" Man, and that's when you make a beeline to the. I mean, you do what Jesus did, right? You take care of the need,
Yeah.
and then you tell them how they can be eternally satisfied and filled, and what have you. But what I love what you just said, and I think this is the important thing for the effectiveness of the work that you do, is you brought your family along. You say they're integrated into your family. I feel like that's the only way you can do it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
can't be these two separate things that you're trying to manage, this career over here, and you're trying to do the cross-cultural stuff over here. It's
Right.
really got to be married together, because I mean, I'm sure you've experienced the emotional ups and downs of this types of work, and you need that family support, and they need to understand exactly what it is that you're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to pivot to the current work. I would say, well, I mean, you're doing a lot of great things now, but I'm most interested in your Leaders Like Us summit. And I got to admit, here on the podcast, T has invited me 3 times, and I have not showed up. So, and that is because
Boo.
yeah, I listen. So my dad asked me the other day, he said, "Son, when am I going to get on your schedule?" I was like, "Dad, listen, I'm trying to do a better job at this." I was like, the schedule's filling up really fast. So I have every intention of attending next year. See, I even put it on tape
Okay.
there for you,
All
T. I have
right.
every
All right.
intention.
Holding you to it.
Yeah, you're holding me to it. You know, so can you tell our listeners about the Global Leaders Like Us Summit? Why did you start it? I think your origin story kind of says it all, but what kind of led up to that?
Sure. So the work that Unify Ed does is we work with K through 12 Christian schools across the country, Canada, even the UK and London, and we work with K through 12 Christian schools on creating communities of belonging.
Mhm,
And as I was working with these schools, they are historically predominantly white, the schools are.
mhm,
Even schools, and this is not all schools, like we know city school, and there's other schools that are not, they're majority minority culture, but
mhm,
most of the schools, Christian schools, are majority white. And sometimes there will be a diverse student population, but that's not always reflected in the faculty and staff.
right.
And so when they ask me to come in, they'll say, "Hey, we live in a diverse area. Our students are diverse, but we're really struggling to have that reflected in our faculty and staff. Can you help us with that? Can you help us think about what are ways that we can be more intentional to look at our hiring so that we're also reflecting in our community? It's not like the community is not also diverse, but we're
Mhm,
reflecting that in our community." But when I get to the school, inevitably this happens, Jerry. When I get there, there will be just a handful of educators of color.
mhm,
And if it's a big school, maybe there's like 7 or 8. If it's a small school, maybe there's like 1 or 2. And at first, when they see me, they're like, okay, thank goodness she's here. We don't have to manage all of the things about, kingdom unity
mhm,
ourselves. Because
mhm.
you know how it is when you're in a Christian school. Joel always talks about this. There's an asterisk behind your name, and it's like you have this job and anything else that we need you to do.
Yeah,
And so there's often many responsibilities. And if
right.
you're a person of color, one of those responsibilities typically is you're navigating whatever the unity thing is
Yep.
at your school, right? So
Mhm,
they're like, okay, I don't have to do all of that. They're bringing in someone else to help with that. That's amazing. But also, there is this sadness, there is this deep sense of loneliness and isolation.
mhm,
And I always am grieved by it because it's familiar. I understand it. I told you I'm
mhm,
so sensitive to this my whole
mhm,
life of people
mhm,
who feel a lack of belonging, right?
mhm,
But what I want to say when I see this is like, you're not alone. Every Christian school that I go to, there's this group of educators of color at every school. There's a small little group who are crushing it like you're crushing it, who are faithfully serving like you're serving, who feel God has called them to this space just the way that you
yeah,
do,
yeah.
and whose head of school is affirming them that they are doing amazing work the same as you. Every single place that I go, the same thing is happening. I wish that I could pull you all together and build this community so that you can see you are not alone. And then I
Mm,
was like, that is exactly what I'll do. I will
mm,
put together this conference for educators of color to build this community for resource sharing, for networking, for community building, to empower and uplift educators of color so that they can see, even if in your school you might be the only educator of color, there is a broader community of educators of color that you can draw from and that you can be filled with. And you can find encouragement from to do the work that God has called you to do.
Mhm.
And so that is kind of the origin story, if you will, for educators of color.
What's been the response so far from the educators? And we'll make sure we put the link to uh, the the YouTube summary that you sent out, the highlight reel. I'll
Yeah,
get it
yeah.
right.
Thank
We'll
you.
put that in the description. So check that out if you guys are listening. Click on that and you can see that.
Thank you.
What's been some of the responses that you've gotten from those leaders who have come? Because this was year three, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Jerry, just so many tears of joy. I
Mm,
mean, I was I I knew it was a need, but I underestimated the gravity of the impact that it would have.
mm,
Um, I underestimated how emotional people would feel being in that space. And it was just, it was really beautiful to see because it was so painful to get to that place. It was so hard. I received so much pushback, and there were so many barriers to getting there. And then to finally get there and see what God did, I felt the reward of the faithfulness of pushing through
yeah.
because people were so ministered to. I mean, we just had the most amazing speakers, and people felt like their souls were just so encouraged. Um, People described it as like, I felt like I was in a desert and I just felt just so renewed and restored. And then also the relationships that they were able to
Hmm.
have both professionally. I mean, people had professional like relationships, but people were saying I was ready to leave Christian education. And we've been hearing just in general, teachers leaving education is a thing
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
But so many, that's overarching. And then that's happening in Christian ed as well. We already
Hmm.
have just a small percentage of educators of color in Christian education. So much of our feedback was I was on the brink of leaving. And this encouraged and reminded me of my calling
Hmm.
and of why God has me here. And so that was encouraging. And then just connecting people so that they're not isolated and
Yeah.
alone was
Yeah.
beautiful because God has not called us to do this alone. And so that was great. But yeah, I mean, I had this woman, she had these beautiful locks in her hair was gray locks, and she was
Mm.
in her 50s. And she said, this is the first time in my entire life that I have been in a professional space where I was not the only person of color.
Wow. Wow.
I
Wow.
mean, and just tears
Wow.
streaming down her face. And so that's not everyone's story. I mean, there's
Yeah.
people who are in schools that are very diverse,
Hmm.
but that was a lot of people's stories. And so they were just so encouraged, and it was just, really a blessing to see that. And then the professional networking, there were in year three, people said like, I was a teacher and now I'm a dean. I was a principal, now I'm a head of school. So people just
Mm.
were able to create these regional groupings where they were able to get professional mentorship, share resources,
Wow.
and really be able to have upward mobility through the networking that they created in that, which was amazing. I mean, so that was great. Just a lot of good professional development that came out of that. So that was a blessing as well. So I mean, it's really awesome to see what God has been doing with it.
You mentioned that you have, administrators who get it and they're supporting, they want to see, they wouldn't call you if they didn't recognize that they had a challenge. But, many of these administrators want to see change happens, but change take place. They want to see their faculty reflect more of the demographic of the community, their school, because it's just you feel a little bit at ease when you do have someone in the school who looks like you and you have some shared experiences. I often say, one of the things that when I talk about the history of Miami, what helped South Florida grow so fast, the Cuban population, is they had already established themselves here. They established their own enclave. Many people who've been to South Florida know about Calle Ocho. That was their
Mm.
own enclave that they established. And as I jokingly say, my Cuban friends invented FUBU for us, by us.
That is hilarious.
They got there first. I'm just letting you know. I mean, they got there first. But it was a
That's
beautiful
great.
thing because of when Castro came and took over, and you had the mass exodus. There was already a community that was set up here, and people were able to plug right in, and it just really
Mm,
contributed to the rapid growth of the Cubans in South Florida, and just their influence in every way, socially, economically. So there is power, there's value in having people within a school who reflect. I mean, it just makes it a little bit more
yeah,
comfortable.
yeah.
But my question is more about the perspective. I
Hmm.
think what my experience has been, the heads of schools, and particularly heads of schools who are white, um, it's like they have a heart for this, but a lot of times it's hard for them to understand the perspective. How
Mm.
have you helped the heads of schools kind of navigate? They would never ever have that experience, but how have you helped them navigate helping those people of color in the school?
Helping the people of color in the school in terms of like their experience being different.
Yeah, just like because the tendency sometimes from leadership and is, hey, same standard for everyone. These
Oh
are the
yeah,
rules, but we understand that people's experience and how they perceive things, people's personalities are just different. But
yeah,
how do you
yeah,
help them recognize that the weight that you mentioned at the beginning, that
yeah,
they're carrying a different weight? How do you help
yeah.
them understand that?
I don't want to say the only way, the best way that I can explain it, the best way I've found to explain it, and I'm really open to other ways, but I think gender is a really easy way, because everyone can relate to gender. And
Mm,
so I think that a man who is entering into an all-female space and who is the only man who is in this space would be able to acknowledge, that that would have some challenges and some discomforts.
mm, mhm,
And they conversely, because of having a wife or a daughter, would be able to have a level of empathy for the challenges that a female might feel, um, being in an all male space and trying to be a female leader, trying to lead when you are in an all male space. And so when I talk about, you know, having a women's conference, and why that's really helpful for women to be able
mm.
to let their hair down and share with other women and cry and have this sacred space, this shared space to tell stories, and how that restores their soul and how that's so beneficial. Men get that. And
Yeah.
conversely, when I say like a men's conference, you wouldn't want like females showing up to your men's conference. But when you are with other men and you're able to talk about the unique burdens that men
Mhm,
carry,
mhm,
that women
mhm.
cannot relate to, that are unique to men, that is something that men can understand. And
Yeah.
so the gender thing, I think, helps people understand similarly. People of color have shared experiences that are, unique to them. And so creating a space for them to be with one another, to find encouragement the way that you would at a men's conference, the way that your wife would at a women's conference, is a really special and empowering thing that you can do for them. When I explain it that way, anyone whose posture is geared in good faith to wanting to understand, I think typically does
Yeah.
understand when it's geared in that when it's explained in that way.
Yeah, that is a really good way of explaining it. Uh, my um, my wife and her sisters and mothers, they actually do. They don't go to a women's conference. They put on their own little mini women's conference.
Okay,
They
yes.
well, they call it Ladies Weekend. You know, that has all types of connotations. And since we're on the podcast, I'm going to air my grievance real quick. And I've already done this. You know, since my wife and I were dating, you know which weekend Ladies Weekend always falls
Oh
on?
no, don't say Father's
Valentine,
Day. Oh, Valentine's.
Valentine's Day.
Okay, okay.
I said, boy, I don't know. I there's an ism going on right here. So, you know, but I joke with them. So I don't remember the last time we've celebrated Valentine's Day on Valentine's Day. It's usually
That
the week
is
before or the week after.
hilarious.
But, you know, to your point, you know, when they started doing this, so they've been doing this for, I want to say like 17, 18 years. It's been a while.
Hmm.
I told Christine, I said, I 100% support you on this. I said, you know, that time that you spend with your mother and your sisters, and now my daughter goes, and
That's sweet.
my nieces go, and they've invited several other people. And every time they come, and this to your point, Tia, every time they come back, it's always a period of refreshing for them because they needed that, right? Because
Yes.
even if you are married, there's still stuff
Yes.
that, you know,
Yes.
you can
Yes.
only, you know, really chop it up with your sisters and, you know,
Yes.
and your mother would be able
Yes.
to give you some wisdom and advice. And so
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
I really see that in your Global Leaders Like Us Summit, you know, especially the way that you explained it. It's this place of retreat,
Hmm.
respite.
Yeah.
Um, you can say what's on your heart without fear of retribution, without fear of being misunderstood. You can in a sense kind of speak your native language.
Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I definitely see all of those things. I wanted to I think this next question is really important. You alluded to the wins and the positives that you're seeing, but the challenges.
Hmm.
You mentioned that you had some challenges kind of getting this going, but you pushed through. I mean, if you don't mind, man, what were some challenges that you experienced getting this thing launched?
Yeah. I think um I probably should not have been, but I was really caught off guard initially by the huge um, initial backlash.
Mm,
And the reason I was initially caught off guard is because in, and I'm an educator and I've
mhm,
been in education for over 20 years. And in education, affinity groups is a very normal thing. It
mhm,
is not abnormal to have groupings, not just around culture, but just in general,
mhm,
to have different groups of people. You know, Jason Rachel's does his conference, and that's an example, like heads of schools getting together, athletic directors getting together, executive coaches getting together, principals getting together. And so there's this sense of like gathering people from similar jobs or experiences or whatever the thing might be in education, because the concept is they have a shared experience, they can share resources and X, Y, and Z is such a normal thing.
mhm,
And so and like people of color, there's a huge national people of color conference in education that is very well known. Um, so it didn't occur to me that this would be super controversial when I announced
mhm,
it. I
mhm,
did know that there had never been like a educator of color conference in education in Christian education. I was
Mm,
aware,
yeah.
but I just didn't realize it would be so controversial in the beginning. So, I mean, people said, "Yeah, this is divisive. Your organization is Unify Ed, and you're not
Mm,
bringing people together. You're separating people. That's
mm,
the opposite of unity. You're causing division in the body. Why do you have to separate people out? That's divisive." So there was the first year, there was a lot of kind of talk around what is this conference, is this a DEI conference? I'm like,
mm,
no, we're not talking about culture at all because we don't need that. Like
mm,
we're encouraged, this isn't like we're not, it's not a training. We're encouraging in one another and sharing resources. But um there was also like what's going to be talked about that white people can't hear. And it's like
mm.
not a secret society. Like it's,
Yeah.
none of that, but there was all this suspicion around it. And it really wasn't until, and I do want to really shout this out. And every time I tell this story, I really want to shout this out because it's very brave and courageous. Whoever is the first person to step out is so courageous.
Yeah.
And I really want to shout out World Vision and Barna Group
Mhm,
because they, year one, both came out and said, we will be your platinum sponsors. We don't even
mhm,
sponsor this type of thing,
mhm,
but like you have credibility in this space, and we want to put our name behind you
mhm,
to give credibility to this conference because we believe in what you're doing.
mhm.
And I will forever be grateful for them for
Yeah.
doing that because once they did that, then almost every other Christian school association also came on board and sponsored because it was like, oh, okay, this is not the thing we thought it was.
Mhm.
And that was really, I mean, that really took a lot of courage to be the first. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because it feels risky and unknown of like what this thing is.
Mhm.
So I appreciate them for that. But yeah, I mean, even this last year, I had someone say, I don't get it. So just if someone has a little bit more melanin in their skin, that means they get
Mhm.
invited to your conference, or, should we have a conference for all fat people or all ugly
Mhm.
people? And I'm like, wow, so it's just like sometimes the conversation can be really cruel and unkind when
Yeah.
people don't understand.
Yeah.
And I think we're entering into a conversation that is like a good faith conversation where you're curious and really want to understand, but sometimes it's a conversation that lacks grace
Yeah.
and just really wants to pick apart or like jab at it, and that
Mhm.
feels really bad. And one of the things that I hope is that even if we disagree, like it's okay if you're at the end of the day, you're like, I don't really think that that's a good idea. I don't feel comfortable with it. That doesn't offend me.
Yeah.
But I think that as believers, we have to be able to disagree well.
Yeah.
We have to be
Yeah.
able to disagree in a way that still honors the other person and doesn't attack their character
Right.
or somehow put them down as like less of a godly person,
Mhm. Mhm.
we have to still exemplify Christ-like characteristics
Yeah.
even in our disagreement.
Yeah.
And I think my biggest disappointment was that I didn't always see that. There's just kind of an ugliness that came out when people disagreed with or had questions about the conference, and that was really disappointing and sad.
Yeah. We last night we heard from a researcher um, who does work with studying the intersection of joy and justice. So it's
Mm.
really interesting work. I don't remember the speaker's name. Actually, I think I know how to spell it, but I'm going to mispronounce it. So, but I'll make sure I get it to you. But she does some work over at Harvard, and she's also at Anderson University. And so the conference that I was at, one of the students asked a really, really good question after she had completed her presentation. Um, the student asked, And I think it was more of a personal story because she had written a book about her own story. So it's like in a children's book form. And the student
Mm.
asked a question. It's like, well, you know that you're going to have, uh, pain and suffering, and you have trials, but is joy something that you manifest? Where does joy come from? What's the it was just such a good question that the student had posed, because the point that the researcher was making is that she had studied folks who are, I'm going to look at it right now. No, that's not the name. No,
Okay,
that's not
sorry.
her. Yeah. She had studied folks who were first time college students, like first generation college students, and wanted to know how is it that they were able to be successful when they didn't have the backing. So they were real trailblazers. And
Wow.
the common thread was they had this, what contributed to this resilience. And she has this whole what she calls a framework for joy or something like that.
Hmm.
um, but they had all of these elements in place that helped them to be able to push through. And it was almost kind of like she was saying that the joy actually began to take over. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And so, I bring that up because I really see that happening with your work. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I had some challenges at the beginning. Bam, God provided some, very well established backers, some
Yeah.
world
Yeah.
renowned backers. And
Yeah.
now, 3 years in, you're seeing how folks are being refreshed. And I mean, I think the thread through your, as we're calling it, Tia's origin story of wanting to make sure that people are seen,
Mm,
wanting to make sure that people are cared for.
mm,
It makes perfect sense that you would do something like this,
mm.
because when folks are calling you and calling you into the schools, you see those individuals, you hear the stories, and God has called you clearly to do this
Yeah.
type of work. And as we were talking before we push record on this, and I've brought it up several times, and I firmly believe this, and this is why we put this in our biblical unity document, that social engagement is a work of the Holy Spirit,
Mm,
100%.
mhm.
And that means that God may call people to the soup kitchen, God may call people to the halls of power,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's God's prerogative. And at the end of the day, you inspect the fruit.
Yeah.
And if people are being renewed, if people are being refreshed, you have people who've been in Christian education for 30 years who are saying, where has basic, this is Jerry Nelson, this KJV, where have
Yeah.
you been all my life? Where
Uh-huh.
has this been all my life? I think the fruit says this is a good thing.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
assessment.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So, two more questions. What does success look like for you with particularly with the Global Leaders Like Us conference? What does success look
Mm.
like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think um I think continued encouragement for people. I think I really want um people to feel encouraged, refreshed, renewed, find community, feel a renewed sense of their calling,
Mhm.
feel empowered to do the work that God has called them to do. I think of Moses and how he needed someone to hold up his weary arms. And
Mhm.
I think of the conference being that for people.
Mhm.
Um, but I also, and this was something that we announced. So I don't know if I'm going off topic a little bit,
No,
but
no, no.
this is something that we announced at the end of this current year's conference. So it has always been our plan that at the end of year three, that we will biannually open up the conference. So we're doing a model that is like the Gospel Coalition.
Mm,
So every other year it will be opened up. So like how the Gospel Coalition has the Women's Gospel Coalition, and then it's everybody, and then the Women's Gospel, and then everyone.
right.
And so next year it will be opened up, and then the year after that it will be back to educators of color only. And part of that is fulfilling the greater mission and vision, which is modeling for the world what unity and solidarity looks like
Mm,
for the believer. And so it's a dual kind of purpose in creating this space that is really needed for educators of color, while also equipping and serving as a space and a model to bring together believers to walk in unity and solidarity the way
yeah,
that God has called us, which is the mission and vision of Unify Ed as a
yeah,
whole. So the conference is birthed from Unify Ed, and Unify Ed's mission is around unity and solidarity. And so, it's kind of holding those two things in tension. And so we're excited about next year in Memphis. And we're kind of slow walking what that looks like to kind of open the conference up. But we are excited to have a track that includes opening it up and really kind of being intentional about, the world will know that we're his disciples by our love for one another. And what
mhm.
does it look like to come together in unity? And that is something really important that we want to be able to model in such a polarized world. As believers, that's a really important thing for us to walk in.
So good, Tia. Final words for our listeners. Final words.
um, I think you know, as I think about my own personal goals for Unify Ed, for the conference, for my life in this work, is, not to be very binary in two extremes, which I
Mm,
think we often can get pulled
mhm,
into.
mhm.
And it's a very tempting thing to do, but I'm really seeking to kind of fight against that and be able to hold both like grace and truth,
Yeah.
passion and conviction. You can feel strongly about something, but also be filled with compassion. You can have the right heart, like position about something, but you have to have the right posture with it. You can't
Mhm.
just be like, but I'm right because the Bible says this, but like your heart posture has to also like matter and be equally as important. Like both are true.
Mhm.
And I love what Justin Giboney says. He says, witness over war. So I reject culture war. And I think our witness is more important than, giving into this kind of culture war. What kind of witness are we in this polarized world? And so those are some of my kind of personal things that I've been reflecting on, holding these kind of two things in tension and not giving way to like binaries.
Yeah. That's so good. And it's so Jesus-like. I gotta tell you, Jesus holds the transcendent, right? The love for the Father in perfect tension with his love for all people. And he
Mm.
holds that both transcendent and immanent. It's all represented perfectly in Jesus Christ. Tia Gaines, this has been, I got to tell you, we've known each other for a while now. This has been
Mhm.
super enlightening.
I feel
uh,
encouraged. I feel like this has been so encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. And may God continue to bless your work, and may
Thank
God
you.
just continue to give you the unction to be the trailblazer that both you and Joel are,
Mhm.
and just really leading the way and shining a light in this space. It's definitely much needed. We need everybody, right? The eye can't say to the foot, or I don't need you, vice versa. We need everybody because the God is about redeeming. God is
Mm.
about redeeming
Amen.
all of his people. So thank you for
Mhm.
joining the podcast, Tia.
Thank
I know we're
you.
going to do this again. So
Yes.
we got to at least make this an annual thing, or maybe yeah, we'll figure it
Yes.
all out.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you,
All
Jerry.
right.
This has
Thanks for
been
joining the
great.
podcast.
Grafted Together is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Learn more about biblical worldview and spiritual formation at acsi.org/graftedtogether.